What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to talk about guitar amplifiers and some jumps in technology, actually, but like tube amps. This right here is the BlackStar St. James 50 watt 6L6. This amp comes in two different versions, the 6L6, which is what this one is, as well as an EL34 example. What is really interesting about this particular amplifier is there is no output transformer.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
There is a switching power supply, or a switch mode power supply, that provides all of the high voltage and the other voltages as well to the tubes in this amp. Why is that a big deal? So for decades and decades, tube amps have basically always been the same. And there's been a couple of kind of downsides to them. One is they're heavy, and two is reliability, because let's face it, it's old technology. So I'm going to show you something new. You've already seen videos on this probably. This is not a digital amp. This is not a modeler. This is nothing. This is a tube amp. But there are some key differences in this thing that I think make a big difference, and I hope other tube amp manufacturers kind of jump on this train. Two reasons. The biggest problems with tube amps: the reliability and the weight. This thing is incredibly light. I had for a while a 100 watt line 6 catalyst, and that amp actually weighed more than this one, and that was a 100% digital amp. So let's jump into this thing. I'm going to show you some of the features about it, and you get an idea of why I think this is such a good idea. Probably before we actually get into actual buttons and features, we should talk about why a transformer versus no transformer makes such a difference in an amp. Usual tube amps have this big metal box. It's usually about like this big, but it's a bunch of steel and a bunch of copper windings, and it weighs like between 10 and 15 pounds sometimes. They're really, really heavy. But it has a big job because it takes the mains voltage. In the United States, that's 120 volts, goes in here where we plug it in. But it has to make like 350 volts, 400 volts, depending on the amp, to make the tubes work. There also has to be another voltage, about 6.3 volts, something like that, depending, for the tube heaters. And then there has to be this other voltage, about 5 volts, for a control voltage for some of the other circuits. All of that stuff happens in this big transformer. It's got a really important job. The problem is that they're heavy. The other problem is because some of the voltages need to be converted to DC, some of them don't need to be converted to DC, what can happen is some of those AC voltages, like what comes in from the wall, can be very close to the audio signal, and they can cause tube amps to be noisy. With a switch mode power supply, which is what this amp has, that big transformer is not in there anymore. Now it's this little box. It's almost it's sort of like a PC, like a big gaming computer. It's that sort of power supply, kind of, and it's in here, and it can do all of those voltage conversions within this power supply, and it does it with a transistor. It does not do it with a tube, and it does not do it with a big heavy power supply. The benefits of that obviously are the weight, the reliability, and you don't have to have that AC voltage next to that DC voltage, which in real life means that this amp is going to be much quieter than a regular tube amp.
Pow!
All right, let's start with the back panel first, because there's some very interesting things here, and then we'll talk about how it works with the front panel. So we got our mains input. That's just our voltage coming in, obviously from the wall. Depending on where you live in the country or in the world, there's going to be a different voltage there. We've got speaker outputs here. one 8 ohm, 2 by 16 ohm, and 1 by 16 ohm. This has a special designed neodymium magnet speaker 112 in it that is also very light to complement the entire lightness of this particular situation. But you can add, of course, more cabinets to it because it's 50 watts and it would probably sound awesome. Cab rig output. There are 3 settings for impulse responses here, 1, 2, and 3 that you can switch. There's a little toggle switch underneath here that you can select so that you can go direct out with this thing. You can go line out to headphones. You can go a balanced out, so like an XLR. And you can also go USB audio. There's a USB over here. This is not the only 3 things though. If you look here, you can see on the screen, once we plug it into the computer, that there are literally, I don't know, hundreds of combinations probably, because you can run 2 different cabinets at the same time. You can pick your speaker types, your number of speakers, your mic types, all this sort of thing. I don't know, there's probably thousands of combinations that you can use. And I'm going to show you something very cool about the standby switch here in just a minute when we get to the top panel that is going to make this even cooler. There is also a effects loop here on the back as well. Okay, let's move to the top panel. Okay, on the top panel, we'll start with our power switch, normal. Standby switch. This is an actual standby switch that actually does something. Normally on a tube amp, standby switch is more or less another off switch. I don't know why they ever put them on there, but basically when you hit this on standby, then only the DI stuff on the back will work. So you can play silently. You turn the amp on and then you leave the standby switch off, and that makes it to where you can play with headphones in your house, recording into a computer, and the speaker, it just shuts the speaker off. So it works. Here's the thing though, there is a reactive load built into the amplifier, so you're not going to burn anything up. You can run it a long time. You can just play normally, normal volumes, the whole deal, with the speaker shut off, and the reactive load that's built into the IR side of this thing will make it to where you don't ruin your amp. We've got a master volume, so this is a global volume for the whole amp. We've got a power attenuator here, so we can go from 2 watts to a sag, which basically makes it a little spongier, which I really like that whole thing. It creates that whole spongy rectifier circuit sort of thing that some amps have, which is very cool. And then you also have your normal full-on 50-watt power, which is very cool as well. It's got a reverb. The reverb is cool because it's 2 different reverbs. If you're on channel 1, there's one style of reverb. If you're on channel 2, there's a different style of reverb, because being clean versus high gain, you're going to want those to sound a little bit different. They have figured this out, and there are 2 digital reverbs in there, 1 for each channel, which is very cool. Treble, middle, and bass are also curved a little bit different for both channels, which is very cool. And then we've got a voice 1 and channel voice 1, channel voice 2. So this is basically our switch between channel 1 and channel 2. There is also a 2-button foot switch that comes with the amp in the box that you can use for the same thing. You have a boost on channel 2, which is pretty killer. And then we also have our channel select switch over here. Now, here's something cool. There's your volume 2, so your volume for channel 2. There's your gain for channel 2, and there's your volume for channel 1. These 3 things are like your master volume. So you have like a single volume for channel 1 for your clean, and then you have a master volume style volume for your channel 2, for your dirty channel.
What we do is, if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to 11.
11, exactly.
Plus that boost, which is very cool. Separate from this global volume over here that can then scale everything back. So you could have these dimed and then turn this down and have like controllable volume in your room, which is very, very cool. And you can also use this when recording to keep everything kind of healthy. So that's pretty cool. I think this thing is pretty awesome. It's funny I keep saying regular tube amp, but it is. This is a regular tube amp. It just has a different power supply. And you might say, well, is this new technology? Is it not new technology? Actually, it's not that much. It's not groundbreaking because it's been being used in computer monitors for years and years and years, and tube televisions, computer monitors more often. When I first got into electronics, when I was very, very young, I went to an electronics school specializing in tubes, but not this kind of tube, in repairing computer monitors. And basically the number one thing was making sure that that power supply worked. And it works awesome. It's been working awesome for computer monitors forever. And basically we have a high voltage tube or set of tubes that needs to be powered. We're using the same exact thing. Let me show you some of the cool features with this amp beyond that make this kind of my new favorite. Final thoughts on the BlackStar St. James. I think that new technology, or repurposed technology anyway, with that switch mode power supply in a guitar amp is amazing. On top of that, I think it sounds great, and it's really easy to record with. You just plug it in and go. There's options. There's tons of options. The sound samples that you've heard throughout the video were with different impulse responses, different speaker cabinet simulations, the whole deal. It's really cool. It's really flexible. It's really easy. And if you just want an amp and don't need to plug it into anything, it sounds great in the room too, which obviously I can't share with you in the same way as if you were here in the room. It sounds fantastic. So I think overall it is a really good package. I'm going to continue to use it. It's become basically my favorite way to record all these demos, and honestly, I've been playing guitar a lot. I've been using it a lot. So there you go, the BlackStar St. James. I'll put the guitars and the cables and everything we used. We didn't use any pedals, but we used everything we used in the video. I will put that in the link to the links in the description of the video. If you have any questions about it, put them below. And yeah. Pretty sweet. BlackStar St. James 6L6. I'm super stoked with it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the like button and the little bell next to it, and we will see you in the next video.